Hi, everybody. I'm Kate. I am so sorry. I could have sworn this started at 1, so it's totally my fault. Um, it's been a weird Friday for me, and so anyhow, here we are. Today we're just here to do some questions and answers on Lightroom. I do have a few tips that if people run out of questions, I'll kind of go to some of those tips for my workflow. But we'll start off. We'll start off with your question, and that came from Scott. So one quick thing is, if you're not actively asking a question, if you can mute your microphone, because sometimes those mics pick up background noise, and that can be a little bit distracting. But we're gonna start with what Scott was asking about, and so he kind of has a couple of questions. And one was about using your mobile devices and connecting them with Lightroom, and I can totally talk about that a little bit. And the other was, his first question was about kind of Capture One versus Lightroom, why you might use one or the other, and maybe, you know, some of the pluses on Lightroom over Capture One. I do primarily portrait photography, and I love how Capture One works with skin tones, and also I shoot with Fuji cameras, and it just handles the Fuji files really well. When Fuji's cameras started becoming a bit more prevalent on the market, Lightroom didn't have a ton of support for their cameras, so that was part of the reason why I started looking for other software that was a little bit more supportive of that. With that said, the tool set in Capture One is a little bit more robust. It offers deeper color management than Lightroom itself would, and so that kind of thing, if that all makes sense. For my professional portrait clients, for things like headshots or even beauty portraits with models and things like that, I traditionally use Capture One to edit those photos because it does handle the skin well. It handles the tones overall. If you're adding crazy colors with gels and things like that in Capture One, it handles the intensity of those tones really well. Lightroom can too. It's just Capture One is just a little bit kind of a level up from Lightroom. There's also some retouching tools available in Capture One that aren't available in Lightroom. So if you want to do deeper retouching, then you would go from Lightroom into Photoshop to get some of those things. Scott, does that help answer the first question you have? Your mic is off, so I can't hear you.
Unmute there. Yes.
Yes.
That's very helpful.
Okay.
So what is Lightroom better?
Lightroom is better for the everyday user. Lightroom is better if you want to batch process a bunch of images. If you have 1,000 images that you want to look at and you know you're only going to do some basic edits, then Lightroom is a great tool for that. The other perk with Lightroom is the connectivity with the cloud and being able to, and I'm just going to pull my Lightroom app open in my phone here, but the ability to create a collection on my computer's Lightroom catalog and then have that collection go into the Lightroom app on my phone and become an album. So that gives me the opportunity to be able to select images that I could work with if I'm on a bus or I don't want to be tethered at my computer. Maybe I'm out at a coffee shop and I just want to take an iPad with me, but I know that there's images I want to work on. I can create a collection for those, sync them to the cloud, and then those images would then be available on my iPad or my tablet or my phone. The Lightroom app is available for iOS and Android, so you do have that option. I can show you where you'd make the collection in your Lightroom library, but I'm not going to be able to, I'm just going to have to show you like my phone here because I don't have a way to connect my iPad to my computer right now. But I'm going to share my screen real quick and I will show you guys. I'm going to open Lightroom first. I'll show you guys where you create those collections and the settings that you need to have. The thing to remember with going from your computer to your phone is that they do have to be signed into the same account. If they're not signed into the same account, then you won't see images that you've shared on your devices. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay, I'm going to take that silence as a yes. Give me 1 second. I'm going to screen share now that I have Lightroom open. So can everybody see Lightroom? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So if I want to play around with collections that are available on my devices, what I actually do is I have a collection set. So that's like a parent folder called Lightroom Mobile. So I'm pointing to that here. And then within that, there's different collections that have this little squiggle line to the left. That means they're synced to the cloud, and that any of those images I can look at on Lightroom Mobile on my devices as an album. One of the most confusing things, well, one of the many confusing things is that in your Lightroom on your computer, they're called collections, but on your phone, they're called albums. So that's a little confusing, but once you know that, then you're good to go. So basically, if you wanted to select an image, so as I've been doing my errands, I always carry a camera with me right now because I'm very interested in documenting everything that we're going through right now. So these are some shots because I went to Pike Place Market the other day, and they are just a few images that I thought maybe I'd work on a little bit and be able to share as we continue to kind of tell the story of our time here in Seattle. You'll notice that these images are offline. That's because they're on an external hard drive. So I just plug that drive in. Once that drive is online, they'll be able to be worked on. Now that little exclamation point has gone away. So once I've selected the images, I can go through and just Command A to select everything that's in the folder. And what I did, because I do feel like I jumped ahead just a little bit, is I went into, actually I probably selected a collection set that I already had created. Oh no, this is my last import. So in this folder, this is in a folder called Pike Place or Pike 2020. So within that folder, I'm just filtering down to the 5-star images. So for me, the 5-star images are images that are things that I want to work on. Does that make sense for everyone? Just going to open the chat window, make sure. Yes. So once I have them down to my 5-star, I would do Command A just to select them all. And then I can go down to collections on the left panel, hit the plus sign, and do create collection. Now, once you're in there, you want to kind of come up with a name. So I'm going to call this Pike Place April 2020. I'm going to put it inside a collection set because you can see you can have different collection sets. For me, I do portraits. I have a travel one. When I do a workshop, I create collections that might tie into specific workshops. But in this case, I'm going to put it under Lightroom Mobile because that's a way for me to know, oh, these are the things I'm syncing to my devices. The key is you have to click Sync with Lightroom Mobile. Now, if you're in there trying to do that right now and you don't see that listed, that means you haven't told Lightroom that you want to do that yet. So if you don't have this option when you try and create a collection, let me know and I should be able to help you get to that. Once I have the included selected photos checked and sync with Lightroom checked, I have my title, I click create. It's now going to add that to my collections list under Lightroom Mobile, and those 16 images are going to sync over to my phone, depending on how quick my internet is, and then I could just work with them on my phone. So I'm refreshing my list now and waiting for things to kind of connect up. So it can take a couple of minutes, depending on how fast your Wi-Fi is. There are some settings in the Lightroom mobile app that you either want to tell it that you do want to sync over Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi only. But as you can see, on my phone here, it's starting to load Pike Place. And now I have those images, sorry, trying to get the angle right on my phone. Those 16 images that are in my collection online are now available on my phone. So the coolest thing about this is the editor itself on the mobile devices is pretty robust, and edits you do on the phone through the internet will sync back and update your collection. So I know that's kind of a crash course on that, but that's quickly how you can get images back and forth. What's also nice about having these collections on your phone is that you can actually go through and maybe do an edit, export it to your device, and then upload it to Instagram. So that's primarily how I use this, is I'll keep images in there that I think, oh, that might be a good Instagram post at some point. So I kind of have a couple of folders just for that, and or collections just for that rather. And then I can pick that up, go in, do a quick tweak or an edit, and save it to my device and upload it to Instagram very quickly. So that hopefully answers at least basically your question, Scott. Do you have it?
Follow up. So if I want to send a photo to a friend on Viber or WhatsApp, for example,
Yeah.
then if I had this synchronization going, then I could take it from Lightroom to my phone, and then I could get it from my phone into my social media.
Yes, exactly. So basically the easiest way to do that is there's an option that's, there's a whole list of things that you can do. And if you open the app, you can see this yourself. But there's a whole list of things you can do. I always do export to camera roll. And then once it's in my camera roll, I can put it wherever I want to. I can text it, I can do that. But you could also post directly. There's a share to option. So you could post that directly into any social media or messaging platforms you're using. Does that make sense? I think I got a chat question maybe.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, of course. Can you go from a photo on your phone to a collection? You can, but the process is not ideal. So typically I use my laptop as my primary computer, and I like to keep all the photos at home there through external hard drives and things like that. It gives me the ability to do deeper organization. If you upload images from your phone or tablet to Lightroom through this whole process, we'll get to your question in just a second, Terry. The main problem is that it stores a copy of those images locally on your computer. So over time, your system would get bogged down by having those images stored locally. The other problem is that you can't organize them into your folders the way that you would. The default for sharing images, so I'm going to go into preferences, and let's see here, preferences, Lightroom Sync. So the default is you can specify a folder that this will go into from your phone. So if I upload an image from my phone, it will sync it through the cloud to my computer, but it will go into that folder on my computer. So documents, and you could put it wherever you want to. But long story short, there's now a folder that has a few hundred images that I have uploaded. But that means they're just all in that one folder. So they're not organized into Lightroom the way that I organize my images. So I don't import a ton from my phone back into the catalog that way because it doesn't give me that organization. But sometimes on the fly, I will do it if I've taken a photo and I'm out and about and I very quickly want to share that. So you can do that. There's a, typically what I will do is I just have a folder on here called mobile, and I'll go into that image, and in the bottom right corner, you see a little icon that's got a camera or a plus sign. The plus sign is where you can import and add it in to any album that you want to.
Okay, so follow up. If I'm taking a lot of photos on my cell phone, which I'm doing now, but it's really harder than heck to get them off of my cell phone into my email or someplace I can use them. So would this be an easy way to do it, to take all the cell phone photos and put them into Lightroom and
Um,
sync it to my desktop computer so I could do things with it?
you could potentially just upload them, you know, through that whole process that I was just talking about. Again, I don't think it will give you the organization that you might want for your images overall. So typically what I do is once a month, I just sit down and I don't know if you're on a Mac or a PC, but on a Mac, I can connect my device to my Mac and use an app called Image Capture to just pull them off real quickly. And then that lets me put them into a hard drive and have them organized the way that I want to. But then they're also in my Lightroom catalog. There are other options, like you could upload them directly to Google Photos. You could do if you're on an iPhone, you could do the sync option with, what is it, the Photos app, where it can automatically sync to the Apple Cloud, and then they would automatically get stored in Photos if you're on a Mac. I'm not a super fan of the way Photos works because it hides everything in a database and you can't actually get to the individual files. So the process there is a little bit more challenging to actually manage your images. So I kind of just do it a manual process. Like I said, once a month, plug my phone in, plug my hard drive in where the photos are going to be saved, drag and drop, basically. So let me get, Terry had a question about security. So I don't, I am not, so I use very minimal, I use Adobe's cloud services very minimally. I only have a couple thousand photos stored, even though I think I get a terabyte of storage with my service. I cannot speak to how secure it might be. I haven't had any issues. I don't think my work has gotten stolen or anything like that. You know, the best thing if you're worried about security is to you know, change your passwords regularly and things like that. You know, I feel like, you know, Adobe has their stuff together, so you know you should feel relatively safe having your images stored there. But the amount of storage that they're offering is not actually enough for someone like me. I have about 20 terabytes of hard drives and I get 1 or 2 terabytes of storage through my plan. So basically the storage that I use are the images that I'm syncing with the Lightroom mobile stuff. So hopefully that helps. Terry, I'm sure you could do a little bit of research and find a deeper answer about their security. I just haven't used, I'm using their online storage super minimally. Okay, does anybody have any specific questions that's on their mind?
I have a very elementary question, if I may,
Sure.
and I'll be very brief so that I'm not wasting people's time. I've been away from software for several years, and I have all my pictures stored in Photoshop in different folders. And I'm wondering, at this point, I also have Lightroom on my computer now, if I can take them from Photoshop into Lightroom and then put them back in the file they came from in Photoshop. So it would be a counter workflow of a normal one. It would go from Photoshop to Lightroom back to Photoshop. Can I do that?
Kind of, sort of, yeah. I mean, if you already have a folder structure set up on your computer, all you have to do is let Lightroom know those images are in there. You know, Adobe made both of those products, so it is pretty easy to move from Lightroom into Photoshop to do deeper edits, add layers and things like that, and then go back and save it into Lightroom.
But I wanted to save it into Photoshop, where I have it now,
so
and go into Lightroom.
So Photoshop, yeah, Photoshop is not a, if I get what you're saying, it sounds like.
Stored in Bridge.
Okay, right. So basically, Lightroom is in a very succinct, in a very abbreviated way to say it. Lightroom is Bridge and Adobe Camera Raw put together. So it sounds like maybe you're using Bridge, then maybe Adobe Camera Raw, and then you go into Photoshop. Is that traditionally what you've done? Yeah. So that I'm very familiar with that process. I still use Bridge because I like it as a file viewer anyway. But the thing with Lightroom is that Lightroom will see the files wherever they live, just like Bridge does. So it's got that component. but it's a bit more robust as a cataloging software because you can keyword things, and you could probably do that in Bridge too, now that I think about it. But because everything is stored in the database, you can, like, I'll just show you this real quick. If everybody's still seeing my screen, okay, right? Yeah. So I'm gonna click all photographs,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm gonna go to text, and I'm gonna type in Paris, okay? So what this is gonna do is it's searching my entire catalog, 213,000 photos in this one catalog, and it's found 1,500 images that have Paris as a keyword. But wait, there's more. Now I can add an attribute, and I can click 5 stars, and now it's going to show me what I've rated 5 stars in Paris. So now I'm down to 65 images. So that's one of the like big powerful things with Lightroom. And because you have the option to look at every image, which you can't do in Bridge that way, it's kind of like the next step up, if that makes sense. Just let me know. Everybody can hear me okay?
Thank you very much for clarifying that for me.
Yes, absolutely. So what you'd need to do is you would just click on import in the library module here. And then you would navigate to where those files are, and you're just telling Lightroom, hey, these files are here. So you can see on the left side, you pick your source. So if they're on your internal Mac hard drive or whatever kind of computer you have, you would just navigate to where those are, click import. And on the right side, you have the option to add in keywords and metadata and all sorts of stuff. So,
great.
So yeah, it's basically the thing that would change for you is that you might actually use Lightroom a little bit more for organizing things and viewing things and maybe rating things, and then selecting specific images to then take to Photoshop to do some deeper editing. But but Lightroom, the Adobe Camera Raw program itself is the basis for what Lightroom is. So the tools are going to be very familiar. The process is going to be very familiar. And it's also non-destructive editing. So that's, you know, the joy, right?
Right. So it only, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So it only saves the changes if you export it out of Lightroom?
Yeah, basically think about like your photo is here and your changes are hanging out up here, but they don't actually touch. Right? So if you go to that folder on the hard drive and just look at it, it's going to look the way it looked before you did anything to it in Lightroom. But then you bring it into Lightroom or look at it in Lightroom, and it's looking at those steps that you've applied. Maybe you made it black and white, maybe you cropped it, and visually that's what you're going to see. When you export it, that's when those changes get applied, and you're basically creating a copy that you can share or put on your website. A lot of people will take those exports and save them forever. You don't need to do that because you can always go back to Lightroom. You can always re-export that file if you need to use it somewhere else again.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, totally. So I'm going to go back through. We got a couple more questions that have come in. So are there any issues with Lightroom and Mac OS Catalina? So I hear you there. I am always hesitant about doing any immediate upgrades. As a matter of fact, I was so bad at upgrading my operating system that I went three operating systems without updating my operating system. So that's terrible. But I did finally just upgrade to Catalina recently. So far, everything is okay for me. I do prefer to wait for when Lightroom comes out with an update. I like to wait a few weeks to a month before I install the update. That way, if there are any issues, I don't have to deal with them. Hopefully they'll get fixed by the update to that update, if that makes sense, especially when there's a major release. So when they come out with like Photoshop 20 or CC 920 or whatever number they're on now, I always kind of wait a little bit. So hopefully, Leslie, that answers your question. Denise is asking on organizing how to get Lightroom to see all externals from previously imported folders when multiple externals independent of one another. When I plug in an external, it shows me folders from another drive, but not the current drive. So in Lightroom, it should show you any images that you've imported. So in my folders list, it shows me 2 drives that are active, which are green. And they're green because they have some space available, okay? There's my Mac hard drive, and then there's 2020 Kate, which is an external hard drive I have plugged in. As you can see, there's 2 other drives that are associated in Lightroom, but they're not plugged in, so they're grayed out. So if you've imported images from multiple different hard drives, they should remain in that list on the left and become active or white when that drive is plugged in. So Denise, if you have, if that's not happening for you, maybe send me an email and we'll figure it out. Or if that didn't answer your question. Jolly is asking, what is a DNG and why would you want to import and copy instead of just using copy? That is a great question. And let me know, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. I'm getting this weird feedback, so sorry, I keep checking. So when you import an image, you do have these different options at the top. So since you're asking that question, Jolly, let me just kind of talk through what each one does and what I typically recommend. So copy as DNG is, first of all, a DNG file is Adobe's version of a RAW file. Typically, these are slightly smaller than the RAW files that come out of your camera. But unless your camera's RAW files are not able to be read by Lightroom, in my opinion, there's no reason to export to a DNG or save it as a DNG. Primarily because you already have your RAW file. So there's no need to shift it and take the time it takes to copy as into a DNG when you don't need to. Now, if you bought a camera that came out a week ago, Adobe won't be able to recognize those files yet. So as a temporary measure, copying as a DNG makes sense. So I would just keep your Canon files. So I see you're using a Canon camera, unless for whatever reason, your version of Lightroom is not recognizing those files. If you keep Lightroom relatively up to date, that shouldn't be an issue, but it can generally take 1 to 3 months for the RAW files from new cameras to be visible in Lightroom from an update. So yeah, those cameras are a few years old. She's shooting with a Canon 5D Mark III and IV. But at this point, those cameras have been around long enough that the RAW files should always be visible. Yeah, so Lisa's saying that she had problems viewing the files when the EOS R came out, but her Lightroom is older and she updated and now she's good to go. So I would only copy as a DNG if, like I said, your RAW files are just not able to be read by the program. I don't know how many different camera types Lightroom supports, but it's a lot. So typically any current camera on the market should be able to be used, the RAW files should be able to be used in Lightroom. The next option you're gonna see, just to talk through them super quick, is copy. So that's when you, essentially when you're plugging a memory card in, you can click this and copy them from the source that they're plugged into, and then select a source on the right where you want that to go, okay? The next one is Move, and I typically don't use Move because what Move does is partly the same thing as copy. So it will copy things from one source to the next, but it will also delete them off the memory card, which sounds like it's a great idea. But if you delete them off the memory card in this way, it does not fully delete the images. So over time, you'll find your memory cards don't save as many files and potentially could get corrupted. So typically, I use add or copy the most. So I use copy if I'm plugging in a memory card and going to a drive. If the image is already on a drive, then I just use add. So just add is just telling you, I have a source over here and I'm just letting Lightroom know, hey, I need to import it because I want Lightroom to know that these photos are here. So that's a quick overview of those. Oh, you know, Peter's got an interesting question about slideshow. So from what I can tell, the slideshow module hasn't been updated since maybe version 3, and this is technically, I think, version 7. So You could try that, but I would look at a GIF program or an animation program instead of something like that. I mean, in the slideshow module, you can, as a matter of fact, you see, I don't even use it because I just keep it turned off. I'm just looking at the settings here. Give me 1 second. So in the slideshow mode, let's see. No, I don't think this is the program that you want to use for that, because it just doesn't give you enough functionality to control the output. You can control how long it is, how long the slides are. I mean, you could try, if you have a sequence of images, you could try making the slides short to kind of create that time-lapse effect. But I think you might be better off using a program like Premiere or After Effects to kind of create that movement or graphics. So yeah, okay. Does anybody else have any specific questions?
This is Matt. I've got a question.
Yeah.
I've been using collections recently to start sharing out photos to friends. And when there was one instance where they wanted to download it and then print it out, but all the copies, when you go to like lightroom.adobe.com, they're all low resolution copies of it, and I can't figure out where to increase the quality of the picture.
Yeah, so with the collections, if you're using the smart previews and the way that you're sharing them is, and you're just saving them from the collections, there's a limitation as to how big that file would be. I think it's 2048 on the long side or something. So big enough to print like a small size print, but not big enough to print maybe an 8x10 or higher. So you could maybe do 4x6s or something. If you're sending images to people and they may want to print them, I would do a high-res export and send them like a Dropbox file or something like that, so they could just download it that way. It's a little bit more work on the front end of things, but that would get them a higher resolution image for printing.
That's what I was doing previously, and then I went to start trying the collection, and it wasn't giving me quite what I thought it would. So cool,
yeah,
thank you.
I mean, if the drive is plugged in, you should still be able to do an export at a higher resolution. But if you're just like saving it to your phone, like I was talking about when we started, that's going to export at a much smaller size. So yeah, it's not quite there yet. You know, maybe one day there will be the option to save it bigger and that kind of thing. But right now that process is, you know, we're still at the beginning of that. The whole being able to sync and work that way has just been for 2 or 3 years now. So it'll get better. But those smart previews, just so you know, they do take up room on your internal storage on your computer. So, which is why I'm constantly battling with my laptop on space. Yes, so what's the best way to export images for printing? Okay, well, I'll show you the settings that I typically use. So if we go into the export dialog box here, so I just selected one image. And everybody should be able to see this export dialog. Typically, I just export everything into my hard drive. And normally what I'll do is create a folder on my desktop. I'll call it printing. Because everything is right there. After I've used an image in whatever way, sent it to the lab for printing, or maybe printed it locally, or I'm gonna post it on Instagram, once I've done that action, I just delete these JPEGs because I don't need to save them anywhere. So the cool thing about this is you can see my directory here is my desktop, and you can just click this to choose where you want the destination to be. I always just do my desktop because it also makes it easier for me to find. And then I always check put in subfolder, and for this we'll do printing as the test. It will create that folder on my desktop for me, which is awesome. The settings that I look at, I skip over file naming and video. I go straight to file settings. I do 100% quality. Under image sizing, I make sure resize to fit is unchecked. And for printing, we typically want to export at 300 ppi pixels per inch. So this is telling Lightroom I need you to export the regular size image at 300 ppi because I'm going to send it to be printed. And then these other options that are on here, I don't do anything with. And then I just hit export. So once it's exported, like I said, it will create that on my Finder window. So now I have a little folder called printing. Now I have a 3 megabyte file of this, of Paris, that I could send to the lab and print. So it's not my big raw file. It doesn't need to be my big raw file for that. Typically a file that size should be perfectly fine. That may well be an iPhone photo, which is also part of why it's a little bit smaller. So, but yeah, that's printing in a nutshell. Did anybody have any follow-up questions on that before I move on to the next question?
I actually do. One of the things that I do with my process is I will do light corrections, maybe some color corrections in Lightroom, and then edit in Photoshop, and then then I come back to Lightroom.
Yep.
And either leave it there or export or do whatever. So would that process still be the same?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, totally. And like I said, images that I feel like need a little deeper retouching, I will pull into Photoshop to do the cloning and the brush tools and things like that. But yeah, the process is, you got it. And Denise is pointing out that if you do a similar kind of process a lot, you can create presets. So if you notice over here where it says user presets, those are presets that I've put together because I use them on a regular basis. So I'm working on an ebook right now called Art of Mobile. So images that I want to export with those settings, I click that and it automatically changes things for that project. Glazer's News for the newsletters for the store, presentations. So I do a lot of presentations. And so it's just got the settings that I want to export those files at, and I don't have to recreate the wheel every time. So if you've got a setting that you want to create, once you've plugged in everything on the right side over here, you can just click add, give it a name, and put it in your user presets folder. And if you don't need it anymore, you just click remove. So that's a great little handy tip. Thanks, Denise, for reminding me.
Yes, that's gonna be real helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I use it every day, so just about. So how do you upload into Lightroom presets editing features? Are these, so Jolly, you're asking, are those presets that you've purchased? Or are you trying to just use the presets that are in develop? So hopefully I'm gonna get a follow-up answer there. So by default, okay, so by default, Lightroom has a bunch of presets, and they've kind of gotten a little bit more interesting recently. There's a couple of color ones that I've been playing around with lately. I kind of like this turquoise and red color. It's kind of fun. You're welcome, Matt. Thanks for joining in. I'm sorry again, so late. So I'm not getting started late. If you wanted to add presets, you can just click on the plus button on the presets panel and click import presets. And that should bring up the option for you to find where those presets are on your computer and tell Lightroom, hey, I have these now. Typically, if you buy presets or get free presets from somewhere, normally those directions are included. I think the first couple of years I was using Lightroom, I had a ton of presets, and every time I was like, how do I add these again? But just start by that little plus sign, import presets, and that should help you. Okay. So Emmy is asking if there's a difference if you use Photoshop to create a JPEG or Lightroom. Ultimately not. What's nice about using Lightroom is that I think one of my favorite things to do, honestly, is when I'm doing exports, is I love this little box right here that says image sizing, and I can change the dimensions very quickly. My favorite one is long edge because it means I don't have to do any math. I love this one, okay? So if I'm just posting to Instagram or Facebook, I'm probably gonna plug in 1500 pixels wide, and it's gonna determine how many pixels it needs for the shorter edge. So if the image is square, then you'd get 1500 by 1500. But if it's 2 to 3, you're gonna get 1500 by 1200 maybe. Again, I'm not sure. I'm not good with math. So I like the fact that Lightroom will do this for me. Yes, you have similar functionality in Photoshop, but it's to me, it's a little bit, it flows a little bit easier in Lightroom. So, okay, so someone's asking a follow-up to the preset question. Typically with presets, I would put them in a location where I wanted them to live on my computer and then tell Lightroom this is where they're at, if that makes sense. So I think if you move their location after you've added them, they might not work anymore. So Denise is asking, for web sharing, would you change the resolution to 72 dpi? Actually, for web these days, people are viewing on Retina screens and higher resolution, bigger devices, like we're carrying iPads that are bigger today. So I actually do 220 ppi instead of 72. It just gives the viewer a better viewing experience. And if you're concerned about a photo being too large, that's where resizing comes in super handy. So if I was going to export for JPEG for Instagram or Facebook, then I would do long edge 1500 and resolution 220. That's still keeping the file small, but giving the viewer a better experience. You know, the computers that we were using before, you know, 5 or 10 years ago, 72 dpi made more sense, but we have a lot more pixels that we can see now. So that's going to look pixelated, not so great. So Mal is just asking a follow-up question about the presets. And yes, I do believe that it looks for the presets to be in a specific location, but I haven't imported presets in about 3 years. So a quick Google search might be able to verify that I'm correct on that. Okay. All right. We're a little bit over time, but we also got a little bit of a late start. So again, I will apologize for that. I'm truly, truly sorry. I've never done that before in my life. I'm always on time. It's crazy. So before we go, does anybody have any last questions? I think we could probably do a couple more before we sign off.
What about the secret tips you were going to tell us?
Well, you guys asked me a bunch of questions. I wasn't expecting that.
Well,
and actually, I've shown you some of them already. I've shown you them. I've been able to answer your questions and teach you things. Hopefully you learned something.
Will replay be available of this?
I'm sorry?
Will there be a replay available for this?
Yes, I did record it. So we'll work on getting that available. I might put it on my YouTube channel, but I know that Glazers wants to put it on theirs. So yeah, that'll happen at some point. It's taking us a few days to get them done because they have to go to a couple of people and then they come back to me and then we upload them. So it takes, unfortunately, it's not an immediate process to get that done, but yes, we'll work on it. And I can send a follow-up email out to those who registered to let them know it's online. So. Okay. Any other questions?
Well, this was awesome. Thank you for doing this.
Well, I'm so glad you guys had questions. I wasn't sure if people were going to have questions. Sometimes you do this Q&A session and you're just like, I don't know what's going to happen. So I did prep a short list of things, but the cool thing was I was able to share some of those tips while you guys were asking me questions. So that meant that I knew what you were going to ask maybe. I don't know. Okay, a couple more quick questions. We're almost done here. So do I ever use Map? Yes, I love Map. Map is great if you have your images geolocated. So my camera does not have GPS built in. There are devices you can get to attach that data to your metadata. But if you'll notice, these images, or 19 of these images, are tagged in France. So I can zoom in on the map and see where they were, which is pretty cool. So most of these will probably be my iPhone photos. So a lot of times when I travel, especially, I shoot with this at pretty much every location that I use my traditional cameras at, so that I have at least some photos that are geotagged, but I can get to like the very specific spot, and then I can find other images and drag them into that location. So that's actually a pretty easy thing to do. It's also really cool to kind of see a map and like look at the places that you've been. So Terry's asking when my next class will be. I'm not really sure. I am doing my own classes on weekends. So if you're following me on social media or on my mailing list, you'll get an email periodically to let you know what I'm doing. Tomorrow, as a matter of fact, I'm doing night photography. And then at Glazer's, there's a bunch of new stuff. We published a new stuff this past week. So next Friday is photographing kids with Nikon. And if you're in a situation and need help with unemployment, we have an accountant online who's going to talk about the unemployment process in Washington. And there's more available. So between my website and Glazer's, there's lots of options for you to check out for more like online opportunities like this. I also do one-on-ones. So if you have a bunch of questions and need a little bit more help, please feel free to email me and we can set up a one-on-one. It depends on the class. Right now we do have, someone's asking about if the classes are full, can we open them? There should be wait lists set up for things. Right now we have to cap them because the Zoom software has a limit of 100 people. So we're kind of trying to figure that out. I think down the line, we'll probably potentially use a different platform that will allow for more people to tune in. And yes, I'll put my email address and my website stuff in the chat room. And someone was, Jolly, you're asking about using Book. Yes, I use Book. I use it every once in a while. What's nice about Book is that it allows you to pull together and create your own books that you could print through Blurb. So just a quick peek at the book module, and this will be our final question. You can see on the left panel, your collections over here. So you could go into a specific collection. And then on the right panel, you can see the different options and you can actually pick what kind of book you'd want to put together. You could even do a PDF and that kind of thing. And depending on what you pick, if you click a Blurb book, it will give you approximate pricing based on your other selections. So yes, I use Book, but I also use Books software, Blurb software called Booksmart. So that's another option. We did try WebEx. The WebEx is kind of the same, unfortunately, and their experience was not as good as Zoom has been. So we kind of are flipping back to do these on Zoom. So I'm putting my email address and my website on the chat room if you guys want to check that out. On my blog, I have other educational resources, info about one-on-ones and other classes that I'm teaching, and all of that. So again, I want to thank everyone for your time. I'm going to stop screen sharing now so you can see me. I really appreciate you being online for this. Again, I'm so sorry we got a little bit of a late start. Totally my fault. Won't happen again, I swear. Anyhow, thank you for your time. Enjoy your Friday. Go for a nice walk over the weekend, and enjoy your life as much as you can right now, because it's weird. It's totally weird right now. So
Thank you. Very grateful for your help.
all right. Well, thanks so much. If you have a follow-up question or two, within reason, feel free to send me an email. Yeah, we'll see you online at the next one, whatever that may be. So
Thank you.
all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Have a good one. Bye.